Tune in to the Real Estate Roundup with the River Counties Association of Realtors. Join us every last Thursday of the month at 12 p.m. on Fiesta 99.1 and every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. on the Mix 104.1 as we explore the latest in real estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or just love real estate, don't miss our expert advice and exclusive insights. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's explore the dynamic world of real estate in our vibrant River Counties community. Catch Real Estate Roundup and make your property dreams a reality.
Hello and welcome to the River Counties Real Estate Roundup. I am your host today, Lisa Calfee with the Source Real Estate Group, and I am joined by Linda Carter, also with the Source Real Estate Group. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
We are so glad to have you here today. Linda and I are the co-owners of the Source Real Estate Group, and we serve the Chattanooga, Cleveland, North Georgia area, and all points in between.
Yes, we do.
So today's topic is going to be one that a lot of people wonder about, and that is investing in real estate. So everyone's kind of getting into the flip game with all the HGTV shows showing us how to do it and not do it. And then also getting into owning rentals, both short-term and long-term. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So if you're looking for that investment opportunity, you are in the right place. So let's start with your personal story. How did you get started in being interested in owning some investment properties in real estate?
In 2020, I decided that I wanted to start looking for something at the beach for my family to go to, and if it could be a short-term rental, it'd be a plus. So the opportunity before the market flipped was the prices were much lower, and I had an opportunity to buy my first condo, which was a short-term rental.
Okay. So you had, how many short-term rentals have you owned?
I've owned two.
Okay.
Shortly after I was given the opportunity to buy the second one, still at a reduced price. Little did I know the market flipped and doubled in value.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're in that short-term rental type scenario, was there a target that you were trying to reach with how much revenue it could bring in versus how much you paid for it?
So we always want to make the most money, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always want to make the most money, and still I wanted to enjoy it. So I think being your first one, you kind of muddle through it just to figure out where you want to be, and the second one, you kind of know where you want to be. Short-term rental can make more money than a long-term rental property just because the turnover, and if you get somewhere like mine were in Panama Beach, I mean, of course, the money you can make on those far exceeds just your long-term rental.
Sure.
And then they're not in there to do a whole bunch of damage or your utilities aren't very much, so you really net more money if you can get a short-term versus long-term.
Yeah. And I had a short-term rental myself. Mine was in the mountains. And so there's all kinds of opportunities with short-term rentals. And I think the key to short-term rentals is it's got to be somewhere people want to go.
It does. Yes.
People want to stay. And when you had that short-term rental and then you added that second one, I'm sure there were lots of things that we both learned as short-term rental owners of what to do and what not to do to protect your property. Like, I remember that, honestly, I think letting friends stay can almost be worse than just the general public. That unfortunately for me, a friend went and stayed and broke some stuff and left it a mess and dirty, and I was like, wow, you kind of don't expect that, but it just happens. But other than that, I kind of had to make sure that I set a minimum number of nights that I would let people stay, because it wasn't necessarily advantageous for me to let somebody stay for one night and then have to pay the cleaner to come in there and flip the whole thing and clean it top to bottom so that it was sanitary for the next person and nice and neat and clean. So I had to start setting a minimum of 2 nights, and then also making sure I charged that cleaning fee back to the person renting it.
Yes.
And at first I was I was a little bit worried. I was using some of the websites where you can do it yourself, Airbnb and VRBO. And I really started with VRBO. I started with Airbnb. And then I wasn't getting as much traction. And it was like I couldn't figure out the way to get my listing to show up at the top. And I didn't have any reviews because I didn't have any stays. And so it was like a double-edged sword. I couldn't get up because I didn't have any reviews. And so people weren't finding me because I was 4 or 5 pages back in their search. But then I went over to VRBO and rented it on there as well, and ended up getting a lot more traction by having it on both sites. And so that was kind of like one of the little things that I learned in my short venture with that. What kind of stuff did you have to adjust and learn?
So I did learn that you could have dual bookings. So Airbnb and VRBO will use the same calendar so you don't double book. So that's easy to get more exposure.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, getting the super host to get will help get you up to the top page. And the more of those you can get, the better off you are. The one thing I realized real quick was I had to set some ground rules, like age limit.
Oh,
so, Panama City Beach, everybody's there, spring break, parties. So I started off with like 21 and quickly moved to age 25 to try to help cut down on just the parties there.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And the mess that they were making during that. And so.
Did you ever have any damage that you had to deal with in the time? Because you had yours longer than I did, so you had more opportunity for people to be in and out.
I did. We only whenever we were having more of the younger crew in there, and just the normal thing, broken blinds and damaged rugs and stuff like that. Fortunately, I feel like I was, I had a good experience when I had my Airbnbs and my rentals because I didn't have much trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, too, you have to keep in mind that your cost factor also includes not just the cost of purchasing and the utilities or any associated fees, but you've got to keep it outfitted with all of the supplies that they would need because it's a house. So you've got all your kitchen stuff. And I know for me, one of the ways that I kept mine stocked if something broke and replaced it is I would go to estate sales and I would buy stuff that, was secondhand, but it was still nice. So I wasn't paying full dollar. And then I quickly learned to always have extra sheets for the cleaning people, because if they have to wait on the dryer to get everything cleaned and dried to reset the beds, it takes them longer. So having that double, it's all these little tiny things that make the biggest difference when you're running a short-term rental.
Yes.
And so what brought you to the point where you said, you know what, I think I'm going to sell out of the short-term rental game?
I wanted to have a place where I didn't have anybody in there when I came to Florida. So I sold one of them to buy a house for just me and my family and my kids. And so that we just had a place always to go, because we were going about every 3 weeks or maybe a month. Somebody was down there in one of the units if they could. So I sold one in order to buy a house. And that's when I sold my first one. The last one I sold, done a 1031 exchange.
Okay.
And bought a lake house in Tennessee, so closer to us.
So a 1031 exchange is basically a way to sell a property that's not your primary residence and be able to not be taxed on that profit because you're turning that profit into another secondary residence. And interesting thing about 1031s is that tax savings stays with that property as long as you own it. But when you sell it, if you don't 1031 the next purchase and do that exchange, if you just say, I'm cashing out because I want to get this money for retirement, at that time you're going to have to pay that tax on what that increase was. But if you keep 1031 exchanging, when you pass away, the debt passes with you and your heirs aren't going to be liable for that tax type liability. There you go. That's the word. So 1031 exchanges are a great thing for people that are in the investment market to know about, and you're local attorney can help you with that. You don't even have to have an attorney. Your title company can help you, and your agent can help you. We've both done 1031 exchanges for clients, so we're versed in that. We can always help people with that. And so this is a great time for us to give out our information. So go ahead and tell people how they can reach you and get a hold of you if they're interested in doing something with short-term rentals.
Yes, my number is 423-505-7969.
And Linda Carter with the Source Real Estate Group. So when you're talking about short-term rentals, we're talking about like you said earlier, more sizable profit. And you could hold on to those and do what we call a buy and hold, which is that you buy something and you hold on it for years to come and you let that value go up.
And so that's what you want to do. Like I said, I bought in 2020, sold the first one in 2021. The market flipped pretty fast, made double my money. So I profited exactly the same as I gave for it over list. So
which is amazing.
That was amazing. Was able to buy the house. And so when I sold the last one, I done the same thing. So I should have had to hold it a lot longer to be able to profit that much. But thanks for the time I bought it, I was able to get that profit out faster. But buying and holding is where it's at, I think. Until you get ready to retire, a lot of people that buy long-term rentals, and I've had several of my clients to sell out, but they've bought, they've rented, they've held on to them until they've grew so much equity that they just want to retire and take their money.
Sure, which is a totally fair thing to do. Mm-hmm. And when you're buying a short-term rental, you can't take it for granted that if you let's say you buy a house somewhere, let's just use Chattanooga as an example, since it's nearby. You buy a house in Chattanooga and you say, hey, I think this is in a great area to where I could short-term rental it. Well, you got to check with the codes because there are tons of restrictions in everywhere across the country. You got to make sure that when you're buying in an area that will allow you to do short-term rentals, because some neighborhoods or what have you, they just won't allow that, and they've set parameters around it. So that's something that, us as experienced agents, we know the map locally to be able to tell you where you can and cannot have a short-term rental. But short-term rentals are great in high tourist areas. They're also great in towns that have colleges because people are coming in. I remember when my son graduated from Georgia Southern College, the first thing I tried to do, and it's a small town in Georgia, but I tried to find an Airbnb, and there were so few in that town. And I thought, my goodness, somebody could come down here and do some short-term rentals and put them on Airbnb and just rack up just for the parent days and the graduations that they have and football games. Oh, yes. So a client friend of mine they moved to Auburn, and that's what they did. They've bought 2 condos, and they have parent days, and they rent them out for football games. And she's booked solid. That's
she has
awesome.
a schedule, and she's booked solid for just the parents and the campus people.
Absolutely.
So it works out really good.
So when you on a short-term rental, do you necessarily feel like a landlord, or does it feel a little different?
No, it's definitely different. And I was going to say, I self-manage, and I know you did too, but that's not everybody's cup of tea, So there's lots of people who have short-term rental like property management companies, and you just really need to do your research to find one that the cost is good and their ratings are good as far as getting you bookings and such. It's sometimes that's to do over now. I would let somebody manage mine, just because it's just it can be busy in the busy time. And so I would probably, looking back, if I was going to do another one, and I've been watching that market, I will hire property management, because it just takes it from me, because they're going to handle it when anything goes wrong, instead of me being 6 hours away trying to figure it all out.
That's
the
key.
People I know.
Absolutely. And then if something breaks, they've got someone that they can send out to have that fixed. And like you said, you're not 6 hours away trying to figure out, okay, where's the handyman, and you're scrambling.
Yes.
And and for you to be able to manage that from 6 hours away, like, what did you do to make sure you could keep an eye on the property?
I had good friends. I had some friends in the community there that kind of just watched over it and would walk through it, and anything crazy going on, they're like, you better just kind of check on it. And I did have cameras from the Blink system I put outside, and I just had to notate it on the Airbnb and VRBO that I did have cameras outside of both doors. And so if anything crazy, if they did call and said I had a problem, I could at least look to see what the problem was and try to address it.
Or if they were supposed to have 3 people and 6 show up, then you know that they kind of misled you on their booking.
Yes. I always said no parties. And one day I was at a restaurant and I just kept hearing the camera go off, and I thought, my goodness, what is going on? And I looked at it and I counted 14 people going in a 2-bedroom. And I called and I said, are you having a party? And he said, oh yeah, we're having a birthday party. I was like, I'm sorry, the fire marshal doesn't allow more than 6 people in that unit. You can't do it. And so he was like, I'm sorry. And he left with no problem. But if I wouldn't have had the cameras, I wouldn't have really knew that they were doing that. And so it could have been a mess.
And when you have a short-term rental, do you have to get extra like liability insurance and things like that to be sure you're safe?
You do. And I mean, when you're renting on those platforms, they have a certain amount of insurance for you as well. But yes, you want to have a larger policy in case somebody was to get hurt on your property, you're liable.
Absolutely. What about pets? Are pets a good or bad thing?
Well, looking back, I say no, but at the same time, I mean, people like to bring their pets.
They do.
They want to bring their dogs, and I'm guilty of doing the same thing. You know, I don't worry about him if he's with me. So, there's good and bad. There's good pet owners and bad. It's the same thing when you rent. So there's been lots of times my cleaning lady's like, oh, we're going to have to be late check-in because I'm cleaning up a stain, or I'm, and unfortunately that's what happens. So I don't know. You just have to use your own discretion.
That's
on
right.
That.
That's right. And here's the thing, like you said, like I've got 3 dogs. I like to be able to know my dogs are safe with me, but I want to make sure that the space that I'm taking them to is going to be conducive for them as well. And, some people let their dogs on the bed and some people don't. And so you just have to be comfortable and protect the things you have, with mattress protectors and stuff like that, knowing that may be the case if you do allow pets to come. So, and then an extra deposit because of a pet is always a good idea, because if there is some damage, then at least you have a little bit that you can fix the damage with.
And let's talk about that. I know you said that renting to friends isn't always the best thing. So when you rent to your friends or friends of friends, you don't have that added protection that Airbnb gives you.
Ooh, that's true.
So Airbnb, VRBO, if there's a problem, you can file a claim and they're going to help settle it and make sure if there's a problem that you need to be reimbursed, they're going to help you get your money.
Sure.
Well, when you rent to friends of friends, that's not the case. So I did that one time that brought one of their dogs with them, and all the blinds were ripped to shreds, and she left him there, and he had anxiety and he tore a lot of stuff up. So and there was nothing I could really do except for, fuss about it and give her a bill. And fortunately she paid it, but that could have been, I think the key is to go through a company that can help back you.
That's a very good point, because you don't have that protection. So what do you do? That's a great point. So let's shift our focus to long-term rentals, i.e. you're buying a house or a duplex and you're renting it out to people with a, lease in place for a year or so. I've had my experience with that and learned very quickly that when I have a short-term rental, I feel more like a host.
Yes.
And I love to host, so that brings me joy. But being a landlord was not my cup of tea, and it's not everybody's, right? And so when I drove by the house and saw that they had put a bunch of old dilapidated appliances on the front porch, I about had a heart attack. And so I was like, I don't know that this is the right game for me. And I sold my rental. But you've used rentals as a way to build a great portfolio, and so. With those long-term rentals, what kind of, what's the key with a long-term rental for, like, how do you need to go into that looking at how much money should I try to make or anticipate to make it a good investment.
Again, we want to make all the money we can make.
Yeah.
I look at things a little bit different when I'm buying for myself. I know that I help investors buy, and if they can make $250, $300 over what the payment is, they're okay with that. But myself, I want to look for something that I'm making $500, $600.
Oh yeah,
more.
for sure.
I want to get something that I'm making more money. So, I do have long-term rentals, and they've been good, but it's kind of good and bad with all of them. And I think the same thing is setting ground rules and when you're renting, and we'll get a good experience, but you could also have a bad experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're in that long-term rental investment strategy, the key to that is buying and holding for 5 years, 10 years. So if you look at it from a standpoint that if I were to have my primary residence paid for, a lot of people say, well, how do I start buying rentals? I don't have cash in the bank that I can just fork out and go buy a, $200,000 house and rent it out. So there are programs where you can borrow the equity out of your current home to buy that one. So you want to make sure that it's paying for itself and making a profit, like you said.
Yes.
And then you can also go out and get just a loan against that house. And, obviously you're going to be putting down at least 20% because it's not going to be a primary residence.
And you're probably going to do 25 or 30 if it's going to be your first one. I know on my first one I had to put almost 30% down because I didn't have the history of being a landlord or even short-term rental host or whatever. And when you don't, that first one's going to cost you a little bit more.
Sure.
With a lot of investors, especially with the ones that I've worked with. Also, you can take a HELOC on your house for a down payment for your rental, and a HERLOC too, which I recently learned a lot about. But those are ways for you to get the down payment money to go ahead and get a loan for your first investment, which if it's already rented, it's a win-win because it's already
income producing
and paying for itself. So it's easier to get that loan for something that's already paying for itself. So lots of ways to get your first property and start. And when you do, it just becomes easy to keep on if that's what you want to do.
Absolutely, because you have to look at it as a business. You have to look at it as a business investment because, there's different theories of thought for how to prepare for retirement, right? And if you're in your 40s and you haven't started preparing for your retirement, and maybe you've been self-employed for most of your life and you just don't have that retirement built up, or you're just trying to add to it, you can think about investment properties as your source for your retirement income.
Well, you just told my story.
Yeah.
I was behind on the investment and chose to do rentals and do real estate to get that's my retirement.
Yeah. So you want to get that income flow from that rent to be at a level where the profit is going to support your lifestyle so that it can be your retirement income, because we know we all can't survive on Social Security if it's even there when we retire.
Right, and rent goes up every year, right? So rent doesn't go down. I don't know anybody that said I had a decrease in my rent. It's always they had an increase in my rent. So those are always going to go up. So you're not going to lose money as far as what you are allotting for your retirement money.
And then your value of your property is going to continue to appreciate.
Absolutely. So if you ever do get tired of doing and being a landlord and doing that, you could pull that money, sell them, invest in something, take that money and invest in,
put it in a mutual fund or do something
that makes you money.
Yeah, on the more traditional that you don't have to manage. But in the interim, having those, I was talking with a lady that inherited a bunch of, we call it doors, right? Yes. So you might own one property, but it has two sides. So you have two renters. So you got to consider how many doors that you have that you can rent out. And so because of the portfolio that she inherited, it was a thriving business. And so that has enabled her to be able to manage that, and it doesn't consume all of her time. So she's still able to retire, but that gives her that income base that's coming in of about 30 doors. Now, that
great.
doesn't happen overnight. You have to buy one, add one, and keep building that portfolio over time.
Yes.
And we get asked a lot as agents. I'm sure we probably each get asked once a week by somebody in the public, how do I find a foreclosure? How do I find a foreclosure? And it's really not a thing much. We don't have as many foreclosures as we did back in, the 2010, 2012, when foreclosures had really started to pick up. You just don't see them that much. So the key is there are still affordable homes that you can buy and turn a decent rent on.
Yes.
If you're going to rent an apartment that's $1,800 a month and it's a 2-bedroom, obviously you should be able to get that at least or more out of a 2-bedroom house, depending on where it's located.
Yes. Yes.
And it's very important, if you're going to be a landlord, to know what the state's laws are regarding
Have
that.
to know that.
And so that you don't violate them.
Absolutely.
Fair housing is a very, very important piece to being a landlord, and you have to abide by that. And so you have to research and learn about it. And then you also want to make sure that you have a written lease.
Absolutely.
And the worst thing you could possibly do is to let someone come into your asset, which is the home that you are renting out, and not have written, like you said, rules to follow
Yes.
to protect you and to protect the property.
Yes.
And so where would someone that's going to become a landlord want to try to first go to get a lease? Like, can I just Google that? Or Chat GPT, I'm sure.
I'm sure ChatGPT can do anything for you. I was fortunate when I bought my units. They had already had a lease drawn up. And she just gave me, she was like, this has been looked over by our attorney, and she just forwarded that to me. So I just used that same lease over and over. I looked at it to see if I needed to change anything, and I didn't. I think she just kind of took an outline and made it what she needed it to be
Sure.
to fit her property, and then just had an attorney friend to look over it. And I'd always say you should probably ask an attorney or get one from, I don't know if there's a Georgia rent. There is a Georgia
Yeah,
rent.
as agents, we actually, in our firm, we don't do property management, but we can lease your property for you for, a small fee, and then we can provide you with the state lease that has been issued for Georgia and
Yes.
Tennessee. We can do that for you and help you with the initial process. Now, there's lots of ways as a landlord that you can pre-vet people with apps that are available out there that they can go online and fill out an application and pay a fee and have their background check done, and it's sent directly to you. And that way it's, through a third party, and they are taking on the all the legalities of it. They've already, given them and vetted all that. And then you can always look at the different applicants that you have to see who's going to be, eligible to rent that based on the criteria that you set. Sometimes it might be a credit score, or typically nowadays, whenever someone's renting an apartment, right, that's going to be probably owned by a large conglomerate, they are going to be looking at 3 times the income. So,
Yes.
yeah.
They do.
Well, we have run out of time, but this is an interesting topic for a lot of people that are really wanting to build their wealth. And so give us a call, Lisa Calfee with the Source Real Estate Group, 423-802-0875.
Or Linda Carter, 423-505-7969.
Do you imagine a career with flexibility and limitless income potential? It's possible by becoming a Realtor. The River Counties Association of Realtors, located right here in Cleveland, Tennessee, is ready to help you unlock your potential. We're your go-to resource for guiding you to obtain your Tennessee real estate license. We're more than just realtors. We're a vital part of our community. Partnering with local charities, we work tirelessly to make a difference. Join the River Counties Association of Realtors today, where your career can thrive and community can too. Visit rivercounties.com or call 423-476-5912. Your new path awaits.